الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وصحبه أجمعين. So our last session for the day, I'm very happy that many of you have chosen to remain. That's a very big honor for me. Unlike the Panthers offensive line in the second half of the Super Bowl, you guys chose to remain. Sorry, last one. I don't have any more than the other guy. I think actually football is, I think it should be banned, to be honest with you. It's completely brutal. The way that they can throw their bodies with a helmet on somebody's knees or somebody's midsection, I can't see how that could be, allowed in any other type of scenario. But that's just my opinion. Huh? Yeah. And how the NFL is a non-profit organization, I don't understand that either. But anyway. So we'll continue. We're reading about, we said there are according to what was said, at least 6 main categories of how he sees the purpose, the maqasid of the verses of the Quran. And we talked about the first one a little bit, knowing al-mad'u ilayhi, namely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we said a little bit that we can further divide knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala along 3 sort of planes. The first one being knowing the acts of God, and in each one knowing that there is tawheed, that they all ultimately point to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the divine acts, everything that happens in creation is indeed an act of God, ultimately. Secondly, knowing that these acts go back to sifat, to names and attributes, and then that these names and attributes ultimately point to the one true God, or true essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I alluded a little bit earlier when we talk about the divine essence, it's going to use language that will invoke imagery more than it will talk about the reality of it, because we can't speak about the reality of divine essence. Even the attributes, you can't have what we call an ihata, right? You can't have an ihata, you can't have a complete understanding of Allah or His attributes, right? So when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Huwa ar-Rahman, Huwa ar-Rahim, Huwa al-Malik, al-Qudus, al-Salam, al-Mu'min, al-Muhaymin, al-Aziz, al-Jabbar, al-Mutakabbir, all of those names, they're names and they're words, and we know what they mean in the language, but how they actually reflect and the true meaning of them as relates to Allah, how could you know that, right? You can't really know it as it is, because when the Muslims talk about ilm, they define knowledge, إدراك الشيء على ما هو عليه, knowing something as it truly exists. That's what they define knowledge to be. So you can't have that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we talk about Allah, we don't actually say al-'alim billah, we say al-'arif, and that we want ma'rifah. We don't say we want ilm of Allah, because you can't really have that. In other words, knowing exactly as it is, but you can have ma'rifah. And ma'rifah means that you can understand the important significance, azama, so forth, by its signs, right? By the different signs. So when we talk about ma'rifah, we talk about knowing the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm going to skip the next the next one, which talked about, anyone remember? Of the 6? Correct. Sirat al-Mustaqim. So, the Sirat al-Mustaqim says, بِتَعْرِيفِ طَرِيقِ السُّلُوكِ إِلَى اللَّهِ. In other words, he phrased it a different way, knowing the way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala via Sirat al-Mustaqim. وذلك بالتبتل كما قال الله تعالى وتبتل إليه تبتيلا، أي ينقطع إليه، وللانقطاع إليه يكون بالاقبال عليه والإعراض عن غيره. وترجمته قوله لا إله إلا الله فاتخذه وكيلا، والإقبال عليه هنا يكون بملازمة الذكر، والإعراض عن غيره يكون بمخالفة الهوى والتلقي عن قدرات الدنيا وتزكية القلب عنها والفلاح نتيجتها كما قال الله تعالى قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى. فعمدة الطريق أمران، الملازمة والمخالفة. الملازمة لذكر الله تعالى، والمخالفة لما يشغل عن الله وهذا هو السفر إلى الله وليس في هذا السفر حركة لا من جانب المسافر ولا من جانب المسافر إليه إنما هو معا أول ما سمعت قوله تعالى وهو أصدق القائلين ونحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد. Very beautiful way that he said it again. So he's saying that suluk, reaching, going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is by this word called at-tabattul. And remember how I said in the beginning, our dictionary, our lexicon is deficient. Because unfortunately, when we lose sight of the language by which the Quran was revealed, and by which the language Allah chose by which this deen to be known, right? It's not just a simple translation. There are many words that have a very powerful significance, especially in the language of the Quran, and the translation just won't do. So one of these words I think would be at-tabattul, right? It says, ذَلِكَ بِالتَّبَتُّلِ. Like it says in the verse, وَتَبَتُّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبْتِيلًا, right? And even this particular construct in language, where we have what we call فعل الأمر, ثم بعده المصدر, right? When you have, or تأكيد المصدر, when you have a command verb, and then you have the same form of the verb coming later in its verbal noun form, it's emphatic, right? Just like when it says, وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا, right? Same thing. So God spoke to Moses taklima. You can't even really translate it because you don't have this type of expression in English language. So in other words, it's emphasizing that God really spoke to Musa alayhi salam. So here, وَتَبَتَّ إِلَيْهِ تَبْتِيلًا, يعني انقطع إليه كل الانقطاع. يعني completely turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by completely also turning away from everything else. وهذا هو عين السلوك. This is the way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he says, انقطع إليه والانقطاع إليه يكون بالإقبال عليه والإعراض على غيره. How do you completely cut yourself or completely dedicate yourself, commit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He says two things. One, al-iqbal alayhi, going to Allah. In other words, you try to reach Him, wal-i'rad an ghayrihi, and turning away from everything else. Right? And don't misinterpret what he's saying here. Because a lot of people, they read books like this and they say, oh, those people, they say, you know, leave the dunya, and they don't understand the verse of the dunya, and they go live out in the mountain, and they want to cut themselves off from everybody and just hold the sibha, and that's their life. That's not what he's saying. Imam al-Ghazali lived in the city. He lived amongst people. Aish ma'nas, so to speak. So he's not saying this. But whenever we're talking about matters of ruhaniyat, when we're talking about spiritual matters, we're talking about matters of the heart. We're not specifically saying matters of the limbs. So in fact, what he's saying is your inqita', your tabattul is going to be with your heart. Even though you're living amongst the people, even though you're contributing amongst the people, you are participating, you're an active member of society, right? It's not, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا رهبانية في الإسلام. And the Quran says, رهبانية ابتدعوها ما كتب الله عليها من قبل كتب عليهم من قبل. Talking about Christians. This is a rahbaniyah. Rahbaniyah means monasticism, which means you physically cut yourself off and you go live in a monastery. So the Prophet ﷺ said, لا رهبانية في الإسلام. There is no type of monasticism where you're cutting yourself off physically, forever, permanently from people. And the Quran talks about people who actually did that. رهبانية ابتدعوها ما كتب الله عليهم من قبل. It's a rahbaniyah or monasticism. They innovated it. Allah did not prescribe it for them. So the true rahbaniyah, right, would be a rahib in your heart, not in your body, not in your being. So there's a detachment, right? And inqita', tabattul. This is our word, or the Muslim word for rahbaniyah. Our word for monasticism, or being like a monk, is to be a monk in your heart. So you can be amongst the people, but your attachment, your aspiration, your himma, your dreams, your hopes, your desires are all attached to the one, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's by virtue of that relationship that you deal with everybody else. Not that you physically cut yourself off permanently. Can you do it on occasion sometimes? Yes, we have that. What is i'tikaf in the masjid in Ramadan, for example, except it's a type of cutting off from everyone else temporarily, right? And think of it as like a recharge, right? And Ramadan is a type of recharge. I'tikaf, right? for people to spend nights and days in the masjid, breaking up their routine, it's a type of cutting off. Hatta al-Hajj wal-Umrah, right? Even going to Hajj or Umrah for whatever days you're going to go out, you're also disrupting your normal routine in order to have a type of recharge. But we don't take that as a permanent kind of way that we live life. So when he says, al-Iqbal alayhi wal-Inqita' alayhi, or al-I'rad alayhi, so going towards Allah and turning away from everything else in your heart is what it's talking about, in your heart. Otherwise, you have responsibilities. People have rights upon you, right? Islam, manzumat al-akhlaq, right? Looking at the whole Islam, and especially in its character virtues that it asks us to aspire towards, you have to look at it completely and comprehensively and holistically. You can't take bits and pieces. So when the Prophet also says, right? Everything has a right upon you, so those things that have rights upon you, give them their right, right? And we know the woman who came to the Prophet ﷺ in the presence of Allah, and she said, you know, my husband, mashallah, he fasts all day and he prays all night. And Umar is standing, he says, what a great man. Look at that, he's doing great stuff. And she said it the second time or the third time. And then he started saying, he understood what she was saying exactly. Umar took the second or third time, perhaps for him to say, oh, I see what she's saying now. Right? That she's not getting the right from him. So that's what the Prophet said, give everybody their right. Even if it's something, look, he's completely cutting himself off, fasting all day, praying all night. But guess what? You have a family, and you have responsibilities. And those responsibilities are the rights of others. So don't think that, okay, khalas, I'm going to be like this zahid, and I'm going to leave the dunya, and I'm going to just be by myself and lock myself in the room and just pray all day and read Quran and I'm not going to with anybody, and this is going to be pleasing to God. No, it's not. Because Allah puts you in a particular situation, right? Allah puts you here, right? And He gave you, for example, those two people are your parents, and this person is your wife or your husband, and these people are your children. Automatically, once those relationships are established, those people, all of them, have rights upon you that translate into responsibilities you need to fulfill. And it is not from the deen, right, to be mukhid, to sacrifice any of those things and say, I'm doing it for the deen. It's for the da'wah, right? If you tell your wife, I'm going on, I don't want to say the whole thing here, but people who do khuruj is great, I'm not disrespecting that. But if you say, I'm going to do khuruj, I'm going to go in da'wah for 6 months, see you in 6 months, right? And she said, what about the children? What about where are we going to eat from? And, you know, what do you want us to do for 6 months without you? Ma'alish, it's okay, honey, it's da'wah, it's for Allah. You have to accept it. That's nothing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's about that person not understanding that you have these rights you need to fulfill. And Allah wants you to fulfill those rights. Why? He puts you in that situation. Right? If you're interested in becoming a full-time da'i and you want to spend 6 months on end and doing these things, great, be held out, excellent. But don't have a family then, right? Don't have a family. At the very least, you actually need their permission, right? It's not just like, this is the way it is. You have to ask them, would it be okay if I were, you know, to do this with you? And if it's not okay, then I'm not going to force you, I'm not going to pressure you, and you have, you know, there's certain rights. And the reverse is true as well, right? For the woman who wants to be very active and involved in a lot of activism type of things, at the same time, she shouldn't lose sight that her children have rights if she has children. Her husband has rights upon her. If there are parents around, they have rights. Neighbors have rights, right? And so the basis of our societal relationships is not based upon demanding our rights, but rather fulfilling other people's rights that turn into responsibilities. Because if everyone was doing that, then everybody's rights would be fulfilled and no one would have to demand their rights. But if we're also focused on demanding our rights, how have we fulfilled our responsibilities? And I would say, you know, to the American Muslim community, as of late, we're very vocal in demanding our rights. Have we been as vocal or as committed to fulfilling our responsibilities? Do these people not have responsibilities upon us, rights upon us that we need to fulfill? At the very least, right, kafil adha, at the very least that we don't harm them, that we don't bring harm to them, which is what we're demanding of them as well. But beyond this, don't they also have a right upon us that we show them the best side of us, the best face of us, that they know why we're doing what we're doing, that we invite them? Are we doing that? I'm not saying this community is doing it, I don't know. But I'm saying in general, we have to keep in mind that we can't just be here and live in a vacuum and be like, as I said last night, a special interest group, you know, that only is very vocal when it comes up in the so-called Muslim issues. Any issue of social justice is a Muslim issue, right? If you're very vocal in demanding rights for the Muslim community here and rely on Islamophobia, and you don't care about the rights and the abuses that have been perpetrated against the African American community in this country for 400 years, you're not a sincere person. You're not an honest person. Or at the very least, you're not seeing the whole picture. Because that is part and parcel of why this is happening to us now, because it's been perpetuated against another minority group for so long, right? It's not something new. It's something that is just being recycled, and we just happen to be the latest group that people are looking at, that's all. But it's been going on for a long time. If you're not aware that people have been brought to this country either by the will or against the will or under very difficult conditions in this country's past, then you need to open your eyes. You need to wake up. If you are very concerned with Muslim rights in this country and you're not concerned with the rights of other minorities, you're not concerned with the rights of the disenfranchised, of the disillusioned, of those people who have nowhere to go but the streets, you know, these are the issues that we should be concerned about. If you don't care about climate change and you don't care about the environment, but you're very vocal about Muslim rights, again, there's a disconnect here, because they're all Muslim issues. Why are they all Muslim issues? Because they affect humanity. And as a human being, and as the best human being, that's what we claim, right? That's what the Quran says about people who follow this path, that they're the best community the world has ever seen. If indeed we are the best community the world has ever seen, then we should show it. And we should show our concern for everybody. And not as a PR exercise, right? Not as public relations. Many times in Muslim communities, we're like, San Bernardino or the guy in Tennessee or whatever, something happened, and we say, okay, we have to get out there, we have to be interfaith, let's have an open house in the masjid, you know, let's do some PR. That's not the reason we should be doing it. The reason we should be doing it is it's the right thing to do, right? Every day should be open house. Every day I should be inviting people, right? And inviting people to Islam doesn't mean that I'm out on the curb giving pamphlets. It means my colleagues at work, the people at school, the people I run into, the people I'm driving on the highway next to, my Islam should come out in all of those interactions. That's Islam. In every single thing, every single engagement I have with another human being, I don't have to advertise I'm a Muslim, right? By giving them, here's my business card, and I'm a Muslim. You know, you walk the old lady across the street, and then you say, and I'm Muslim. You know, come to the masjid and give her a card. Just be Muslim. Just be it, right? Act it. And let people see for themselves. Let them make their own conclusions. You don't have to make the conclusions for them, right? Just act that way. Be in the best possible way. Islam is not a uniform. It's not a banner or placard that you raise. You know, that's not Islam. Islam is what you live inside, and then it comes out to people, right? And then the shada or ra'iha, the beautiful aroma that comes from your internal Islam will come to people. That's how the Prophet ﷺ invited people to Islam, right? Either with wisdom, the Prophet ﷺ was the best da'i ever, right? Does anyone disagree with that? And he used shatta wasa'il. He used all different types of methods, depending upon the context in front of him. So when the Prophet ﷺ took that one man and they said he is the best, the strongest wrestler amongst us, and the Prophet ﷺ wrestled with him and flipped him, right? Does that mean that we use wrestling in dawah all the time? No, but that's for that context, right? That's what that particular person needed, in that particular way. And so for every group or person the Prophet ﷺ was dealing with, he would do it this way. Amin Wufud, the year of the delegation, when many of the Arabian tribes, the 9th year after the Hijrah, many of the Arabian tribes came to Medina to pledge their allegiance and Islam to the Prophet ﷺ. He would greet them and say, Ahlan bil Tawwa, Ahlan bil Qabila, and he would say, Sama'na shaykh min shi'arikum, let us hear something of your poetry, and who are the poets amongst you, right? And he would say that, I love this tribe or this group, and he would answer back in the same language they would speak to him, to the point that Sayyidina Ali would say to the Prophet ﷺ, you know, I hear you speaking in their dialect and I don't understand it myself. That was one of the mu'jizat. That was one of the miraculous things of the Prophet ﷺ, that they would speak them in their very local dialect that was unknown even to the Qurayshiyyin, the people of Quraysh, and the Prophet ﷺ returns back in the same dialect. Like the person from Kenya, when he asked the Prophet ﷺ, هل من البر أمسي وفم سفر. So look at Himyariya, which is the south of Yemen, instead of alif lam for the ta'rif, they have alif mim, right? And in some languages, even in the Egyptian dialect, there's remnants of it. So we say imbari, which is really al-bariha, right? So he responded back when the person asked him, is it from bir? Is it from righteousness to fast during travel? Right? The Prophet ﷺ responded back, لَيْسَ مِنَ الْبِرِّ أَمْسِيَامُ فَانْصَبَ. No, it is not from bir normally to fast while one is traveling, or in that particular context. So he was always dealing with people in the context, right? That he would appeal to them from where they're at, not from where he's at, from where they're at. So people would bring him gifts. You would get the Azerbaijani, you know, burda or jubba like this. That was Zayy al-Kurmayn, right? That was had a very narrow sleeves, right? And that wasn't the style of the Prophet ﷺ. It wasn't the style of the Arabian Peninsula. But nonetheless, he would wear it. You know, he would get the burad and other things that would be different colors from Yemen. He would wear it. He would accept, for example, the building of the trench for the battle of the trench, something the Arabs didn't know, but he accepted that from Salman because it fit the principle that he was going by to defend the city. He would wear a ring that was khatim to seal his official letters, even though the Arabs didn't use that, and that was something that was needed to give letters to the Byzantines and the Ethiopians and the Persians, because they did all of their formal correspondence with khitab, with a seal, wahakah, right? So there was always this sort of multiculturalism already, even during the time of the Prophet, in his own life, and he demonstrated this to people. So da'wah has to be built upon, you know, being involved in the lives of those people. You know, the greatest da'is that we've had, they've traveled and actually lived and intermarried, right? We were not aware of it, but they're the most populous Muslim nations on earth is Indonesia. I think something like 225 million or something above that. Indonesia, there was never a Muslim army that entered into that place. Indonesia became Muslim purely by du'at, purely by people who traveled from the south of Yemen and to some extent from the south of India, and traveled there and intermarried with people there and just lived Islam as their life. And now, you know, over several centuries, all those people became Muslim, right? And in fact, and still in Indonesia today, they identified the 9 original people who went there, right? And they call them the 9 saints or the 9 awliya, who went to Indonesia and they spread the da'wah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there. And their places are known. 9 people, 225 million people, came from 9 people who originally introduced Islam, without a single drop of blood being spilled, no sword, nothing like that. And because they lived it, they lived Islam, that's what they did. So we just need to live it, right? We don't need to be brand managers for Islam. Islam is not a brand that we need to manage. It's not a promotional activity, right? We don't need to have promotional campaigns extolling the virtues of Islam. What we really need, in my humble opinion, is we need to live it. Every single one of us, in all our interactions, everywhere we go, in our homes, places of work, the way we drive our car, right? You may think it's like, I'm guilty of this often, but you may think it's like fahla or whatever we call it, you know, to kind of speed up and go and cut people off, getting onto the exit ramp, and then you go all the way to the beginning of the line. What if they saw you and they saw you wearing your kufi or something, or you're wearing your hijab, and they say, oh, look at those people. They're not even rude on the streets. They're even rude in the way they drive, right? And it's not because we're worried about what they think of us, but that's the basis of interaction between human beings, right? The basis of interaction between another human being and yourself. When it's talking about personal comfort, we have a word for that, right? That's part of our lexicon. It's called ithar, right? الَّذِينَ يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, right? The ones who prefer others over themselves, even if they're not particularly in a very good situation themselves. And some of them said this is based upon One incident happened during the life of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ, he did when he went to Medina, آخى بين المهاجرين والأنصار, which means he designated like brotherhood relationships, one muhajir, one immigrant from Mecca with one person from the Medina. And he did that with everybody, so as to make a strong social bond. So the person who was in Medina, Al-Ansari, he would take him in, he would give him a place to sleep, maybe help him start a business in the market, things like this. So it just so happened that one of the Ansar had one of the people from Mecca, and he gets home and he asks his wife, what do we have to eat? And she said, we have nothing except maybe just for one person. And he had children. He said, okay, prepare it, put the plate there, and dim the lamp. Right? It had kerosene or a type of lamp, they didn't have lights. He said, dim the lamp and we'll sit there, but put empty bowls for us. So he did it so that his guests wouldn't even know that they're not eating, and they pretended to eat. Because he wouldn't have eaten if he saw that they weren't eating. And he did all that for the muhajir that he was guests. يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ. Right? وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. This is من أعلى مراتب المعاملة مع الخلق. This is from the highest, most beautiful way you can engage with other people, that you prefer them in personal comfort, in dunyawi comforts, by giving it to them. Right? Someone cuts you off at line at the supermarket or something, who cares? Why are you getting upset? Right? If it's in the Arab world, however, you'll never get to the front of the line. So you have to be a little more firm. But here, it's not a big deal, you know? Just show them a smile. Even if someone, you know, you walk into the supermarket and they're like, you know, they give you one of those Donald Trump looks, like that. So what? Smile back, right? الابتسام بوجه أخيك صدقة. Smile in the face of your brother, it's a sadaqah, it's a charity. You lose nothing. And don't worry about their reaction. It's not about their reaction. Because akhlaq is not about how the other person is or how they're going to react. It's about who you are. And you do. And you be who the person you are. It doesn't matter how other people are doing. Then it's no longer akhlaq. It's no longer character. It's based upon someone else's actions. That's not character. Character is having that attribute no matter who the person is that you're dealing with. So, let's go back to the text. So this idea of tazkiyah. So he says, فَعُمْدَةِ الطَّرِيقِ أَمْرَانِ. So the pillars of this suluk are two things. الْمُلَازَمَةُ وَالْمُخَالَفَةُ. Right? Committing to something and avoiding something. What are you committing to? الْمُلَازَمَةُ بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. To the remembrance of God. وَالْمُخَالَفَةُ لِمَا يَشْغَلُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Right? And the mukhalafah, or the avoidance, all that distracts from God. So very basic components here. Do all that reminds you of Allah, and avoid all that doesn't remind you of Allah. That's it. That's suluk in a nutshell. And then he says something profound. He says, وَهَذَا هُوَ السَّفَرُ إِلَى اللَّهِ. And this is traveling to God. وَلَيْسَ فِي هَذَا السَّفَرُ حَرَكَةٌ لَا مِنْ جَانِبِ الْمُسَافِرِ وَلَا مِنْ جَانِبِ الْمُسَافِرِ إِلَيْهِ. He said, this type of travel, there's no movement, either from the one traveling or the one that you are traveling to. So it's not a physical travel, right? And he says, how could it be? When Allah says about himself, أَوَلَمَا سَمَعْتَ قَوْلَهُ تَعَالَى وَهُوَ أَصْدَقُ الْقَائِلِينَ وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. And we are closer to him than the carotid artery. Sometimes translated as jugular vein, but I think the warid is the one that supplies blood, is actually the carotid and not the jugular vein, unless I'm mistaken. So he says, للطالب والمطلوب مثل صورة حاضرة مع المرآة ولكن ليست تتجلى في المرآة لصدأ في وجه المرآة فمتى استقلتها تجلت فيه الصورة لا بارتحال الصورة إلى المرآة ولا بحركة الماء إلى الصورة ولكن بزوال الحجاب. So he describes how is this traveling, how is this safar. It's like you have a mirror and you have the image that you want to see in the mirror. So how can the image be clearly seen in the mirror? He said it's not about bringing the mirror closer or bringing the image closer. That's not going to make a difference in how you can see it. But if the mirror has a curtain on it or it's distorted, you need to fix the distortion. Or you need to remove the veil over it. So he says, this goes away by zawal al-hijab, by removing the veil. فإن الله تعالى متجلى بذاته لا يختفى إذ يستحيل اختفاء النور. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is apparent. One of his names is Allah, right? Allahu nuru as-samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. There's nothing covering him. There's nothing preventing you that's specific to Allah for you not having a greater God consciousness or a greater taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not what's preventing you. What's preventing you is something having to do with you, not with him. The problem is with you. The problem is not with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hasha. Right? Because he can, يستحيل اختفاء النور. How can light be hidden? How can light be hidden? How is that possible? So that's not the problem. وبالنور يظهر كل خفاء الله نور السماوات والأرض as we said. وإنما خفاء النور على الحلقة إلى أحد الأمرين إما لقدرة في الحلقة وإما لضعف فيها. Right? So it's your eyes that can't see right, or the image, the mirror that is messed up. So either it's weak, like you can't see very well with your eye, or kudura, which means there is some type of impediment in your eye that is preventing you. Again, this is all imagery, preventing you from really getting it, from really seeing it. أو إما إضافة فيها إثبات يطيق احتمال النور العظيم الباهر كما لا يطيق نور الشمس فبصار خفافيش فما عليك إلا أن تنقي عن عين القلب قدرته وتقوي حلقته فإذا هو فيه كالسورة في المرآة حتى إذا ظافرك بتجليه فيها بادرت وقلت إنه فيه وقد تضرع باللاهوت ناسوتي إلى أن يثبت الله بالقول الثابت. So basically what he's saying is, if it's weakness in your eye, right, it's because we are inherently weak. Just like the bat. It can't go out during sunlight because the light of the sun is too much for it to bear, so it sees in the dark. So us, Allah is so plain and manifest, right? You just have to look that our vision, our spiritual vision is too weak for us to see how obvious it is. How can all this been? How can all this be? How could all this be an accident? How could there not be a salih or a khaliq behind all of these things that we see? It's just so obvious. How can people deny it? Right? And that's what the believer should say to himself or think to himself. How can these people deny that? What is preventing them? And the thing that is preventing them is nothing that's inherent about the world. It's plain as day to see, well, what's preventing them? It's something about them. So your sins, your missteps, your inshighalat, you being busy with other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these are all a type of hijab, right? They're all veils, right? And it could be one veil after the next. And Ghazali doesn't talk about it here, but others talk about how the veils are of two types, dhulmani or nurani. So the dhulmani, the dark veil, are your sins, right? Every time you commit a sin, every time you willfully commit something wrong, it takes you a step back, and it makes you have less of an aptitude to see the light. And until you go further and further, like the example of the person's heart, every time you make a sin, there's a black speck, and black speck, and black speck, and black speck, until it's all black. And then once you get to that point, you no longer realize that black specks are being added, because you're on a point where you have no more, a point of no return almost. You're no longer a realization that you are in your finale, that you have felt completely. But someone who is normally striving, when they make a mistake, they immediately feel it, right? الذين إذا مسهم طائف من الشيطان إيش تذكروا فإذا هم مبصرون, right? The ones مسهم طائف من الشيطان, something of satanic, either the devil himself or their own thoughts, مسهم gets to them. تذكروا, they immediately remember. Wait a minute, that's not who I am. I made a mistake. فإذا هم مبصرون. This is called إذا الفجائية, right? The surprise إذا, like immediately, مبصرون. Immediately they become aware. Wait a minute, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. This is the wrong path. Let me go back, because that's what tawbah and inabah means, going back to a slip. So whenever you slip, you go back. Whenever you slip, you go back. Whenever you slip, you go back, and you remain on a straight path. As long as when you slip, you go back. But if you keep slipping and slipping and slipping and slipping, you try to go back and you don't even know where to start. You can't see the path anymore. But if you're close, then a little slip is easier to come back to it. So Imam Ghazali uses this parable, uses this imagery to try to demonstrate to us that in the beginning and at the end, it's always going to be about you, about fixing yourself, about rectifying your heart, right? And it's not just, don't be deluded by your own deeds. Don't be deluded by, oh, I'm reading Quran, I'm having a lot of tilawa, I read all the tafsir, I'm an alim, I'm a smart person, I know this, and kada, right? If it's still I, it's still ana in the equation, you have not reached it yet. When it's only about huwa, when it's only about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first words out of your mouth, when someone praises you or says something about you or anything about you, you say, Allah, alhamdulillah. Right? If someone praises you, say, you know what? Satarallah, Satarullah jameel. Allah's satar is beautiful. He's covered my shortcomings from people. Because if they knew the real me, they wouldn't want to listen to me. They wouldn't want to sit with me. But Allah's satar, right? Yastur, al-awrat. He covers people's mistakes. He covers people's nakedness in the form of their shortcomings. This is why people who think have any opinion of anyone. But if they truly knew how I was and what I would be thinking about, things like this, in my darkest moments, why would they want to know me? Why would they want to listen? Why would they want to sit with me? And so forth. So you take it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You take it back to al-mann wal-fadl. You take it back to the pure blessing and bounty and rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. Say by the fadl of Allah, the bounty and His mercy, let them rejoice. Rejoice in that. In other words, don't rejoice that I did, but rather Allah chose me by which to make manifest this beautiful thing. فَأَفْرَحْ بِذَلِكَ. So I rejoice in Allah's choosing me, not in me doing something. هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. It's better than what they think they have accumulated. You haven't accumulated anything. Right? Don't think, oh, I'm racking up the good deeds. You go to Mecca and pray 5 days to Haram, and you say to yourself, that's 5 prayers each day, times 5 days, 25. Each prayer is 100,000. 25 times 100,000, that's 2.5 million. Cool. In the bank. I can go another 30 years, I'm going to have to pray that much because I have 2.5 million in the extra credit department of all the prayers I did in Mecca. Again, it's I. This is fun. Allah gave you the trip to Mecca. Allah gave you the trip to Medina. Right? Allah will give us all the trip to Bayt al-Maqdis soon, inshallah. Allah gives us those things, but not you. So I think we want to stop here and take your questions and answer. I'm very honored that you all came out to listen today. You had very other things to do with your time. So I thank you for honoring me like this and honoring Imam Ghazali and what we're trying to do. I just tried to give a little bit of flavor of the book, and hopefully if there is a figure that we can come back and try to read more of it, if that is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will work for us. Alhamdulillah.
Anyone have questions that they've read?
There's 3 questions here. I'll read them out. One of them said here, I recently realized I struggle with self-worth issues. How can we reconcile the emotional need to have self-worth and self-confidence with the need to be humble? You mentioned if we think we are better than others is a form of arrogance like shaitan, but isn't self-worth partly knowing you have attributes or traits or knowledge more than others? That's an excellent question. One of the things that we look at in terms of virtues, say like humility, for example, or courage, or any of those virtues, and it's something that even people prior to Islam kind of postulated. Aristotle was credited with this nadariya, a way of looking at it, is that the most beautiful virtues are a balance between two extremes. So if we say a shaja', or courage, is a commendable virtue, well, what does the extreme of courage look like? So an extreme absence of courage, we would call that cowardice, right, or jubn. And an extreme abundance of it, in other words, too much, we would call that recklessness or tahawwun. So we should neither be reckless, nor should we be cowards, but we should be the balance in between. And the person who was the epitome of the balance of every single virtue was the Prophet Muhammad, right? And everyone, according to the degree that they practice the sunnah of him, of the Prophet, they will have some share of this balance of the virtue. So humility is one of them, right? So we're neither arrogant, right? That would be no humility. And if we wanted to say too much, or humility not in its proper context or place, they call it da' in Arabic, or it would be debasement. So we don't debase ourselves, nor do we, conceal ourselves or act in an arrogant manner. So it's a balance. So the idea of self-worth and self-confidence, the question seems to assume that my idea of self-worth and self-confidence will come in the form of me thinking that I may have something more than someone else, or be better than someone else. And in the Islamic tradition or paradigm, I don't think that's where we get it from, right? Because eventually that will lead you to arrogance, no matter how you cut it. So our idea of self-worth is not that I am better than this person. My idea of self-worth is that I am a creature of God. That's where self-worth comes from. Allah created me, right? And you need to know Allah to know that you're worth something. Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbah, right? Whoever knows themselves, they will know their Lord. So if I know that Allah is capable of creating an X infinity, trillion other number of people besides me, but He chose me, right? I could have not existed, you could have not existed, none of us could have existed here. But He chose me and you and everybody else in this room and everybody outside for a reason. That means my worth, my qima, my value is because Allah gave me value. Allah gave me worth. So don't ever think your life is worthless, right? And the reason that people think their life is worthless is because they have certain expectations that are not met, or they look at others and they compare themselves to others and say, well, next to that person, I haven't done anything. But at the very least, your worth is not from that. Your worth is because Allah put you on this earth. And if Allah puts you on this earth, and He is the one who assigns value to things, is that not enough for you? He wants you to do something with your life, right? Don't ever think your life is worthless so that you should end it or anything like this. As long as you're still here, as long as you're still breathing, that means Allah wants you to be here. And surrender your will to His will. Surrender everybody else's will to His will. That's more important and more powerful, right, and more potent than what anyone else can say about you. So derive your self-worth from the fact that you are a creature of God. And you can increase your self-worth the more you live that realization, the more you become a servant of God, right? That's the highest form of self. In other words, when you become a slave of God. Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-haram ila al-masjid al-aqsa. So, arguably, the greatest night of the Prophet's life, when he was taken from Mecca to Bayt al-Maqdis and then to Bayt al-Izza, right, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how did Allah describe him? Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi, by his slave, right, by his servant. This is the highest form. And the highest form of self-realization is to no longer see yourself. Yourself gets in the way. It's really an obstacle. You keep saying, oh, I need to do this, or I need to do that, or I don't feel good about this. But when you dedicate yourself to something other than yourself, then you say, well, what should I dedicate it to? To another human being? No, because it's still about myself, someone else. But if I dedicate it, commit it completely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that's true liberation. That's where you liberate yourself. In our societies now, people think liberation is allowing the self to do whatever it wants. That's not liberation, that's prison. You'll be imprisoned by your desires and your passions. But if you liberate yourself from those things, right, by having the presence of mind and heart to say, I am more than my passions and my desires, I can be a servant of the creator of those passions and desires, the creator of me, that's a higher form of reality. That's a higher form of self-actualization than letting the self do what it wants. So our self-worth we always have the choice to be a completely different self. Allahu A'lam. Okay. Okay, thank you. There's quite questions that are good questions, a little bit kind of unrelated, but I'll kind of unrelated. Let me do the question 2 here first, and then I'll do the ones that are kind of related but unrelated. So how does one reach and internalize the meaning of Tawheed al-Sifat without becoming fatalistic towards the world? It's a good question too, and that's a common kind of assumption. Many Orientalist Muslim academics, when they first began studying Islam in the last century, they used to write that Islam was fatalistic. Because Muslims are always saying, MashaAllah, Insha'Allah, and kada. They're leaving everything up to the Mashiach. They're leaving everything up to the will of God, so it's like they don't do anything and they leave everything up to Allah. They didn't understand, right? Because we're not talking about the act of the limbs, right? We are arkan, we have limbs that we do with, but we have the heart. So the heart, which is the true essence of the human being, realizes that it's always up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that whatever happens was indeed the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we can't go outside of that. But that will only give me more impetus to do more, right? Because that means I'm unbounded, I'm unbridled. I can do anything if Allah wills it, right? It's actually liberating. It's not fatalistic. So when you see that these attributes are being manifest, that means I too could be, I am indeed an object of the manifestation of the divine attributes. I am a walking advertisement, all of us are, for the attributes. Because you're alive, you're hayy, you're mazluq, Allah gives you sustenance, you're makhluq, Allah created you, you're marhum, right? Allah had mercy upon you. These are all divine names and attributes, right? You're makhluq, Allah faddalak, all of these things. So I'm about all of that, right? If I realize that these are based upon going to these beautiful hadith and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it doesn't mean that, okay, Allah knows everything, so I shouldn't do anything and it's all been written already. Not for you. You don't know everything. You don't know what's going to happen. Allah knows, so don't put yourself in Allah's shoes, so to speak, right? You cannot understand the divine perspective. Why would you try to? That you cannot understand. From your human perspective, you have all of these choices in front of you. This line is like the road ahead to the end of your life. You don't know where it's going to end off, but it's going to end somewhere, right? And that's why for the true believer, there's no past and there's no future. Past is something you can't do anything about. Future is not guaranteed. So what do you have? The present. So, in every single instant of your present, you are working towards fulfilling in each breath the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, also not just what He wills, but what He commands us to do. So you want to have congruence between what He wills and what He commands you to do. So now some of the unrelated questions. In regards to addressing the needs of other minorities in our community, how should we, as Muslims, treat the LGBTQ community? Which, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, is that it? Yeah. There are a lot of social issues that are happening now, not just in the States, but in other places, where we're being challenged about how we will go about addressing them, such as these issues, right? Clearly, I'm not going to say to you that the idea that people having same-sex relationships or having transgender operations, except probably even the fuqaha, they talk about some limited circumstances where that is allowed. But in general, we're not saying that that's going to be something that, as from a perspective of Muslim scholarship, that we're going to support, right, for someone to do that. However, we do not hold people in less esteem or judge them based upon the decisions that they make, especially as Muslims in this country, right? So the idea, for example, that if someone is Muslim, can a Muslim be a Muslim and lesbian or homosexual at the same time? And our answer to that should be without any type of doubt, yes, it's possible, right? Why? Because Islam, there's belief and there's practice, and just because you don't practice a particular aspect of it, it doesn't mean that puts you outside of Islam at all, right? And in fact, the idea of homosexuality in terms of having an attraction to the same sex, that in of itself is not sinful. It's not a sin. What is sinful for us is acting upon it. That's what's sinful. So it may very well be that people, for whatever reason, hormonal imbalance, or maybe just societal influence, or maybe no reason whatsoever, we don't have to know that. But for whatever reason, they do have some type of inclination in a sexual context to still a member of the same sex. For them, I would say from a spiritual perspective, and if you're a Muslim at the same time, clearly this is a trial and test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's something that, people have other inclinations, right? Some people might have inclination to drink alcohol, or to use drugs, or to do a myriad of other things, or to look at pornography, right? They may have of the opposite sex, perhaps. That's a test, that's a trial. So by virtue of falling prey to these type of inclinations, it doesn't take you outside of Islam, right? But we would say that that doesn't mean you shouldn't be allowed to come to the masjid. It doesn't mean that you should receive your rights as a U.S. citizen, for example, or as a member of the community, right? We don't care what a person's sexual orientation is. For example, if they are from the fuqara, if they are from the masakin, if they are people who need of zakat, need of charity, we don't have a questionnaire. We don't make a questionnaire to ask them, well, what's your sexual orientation? We want to make sure we're acting to the right people. No, it's not our concern, right? We're dealing with them from the aspect of human being to human being. And outside of that, we treat them equitably and fairly. If no one should be turned away from the masjid at all, right? Even if they have a particular situation that's going on with them in terms of the sins that they do, they may be sinning different than we do, that's all. So I think we have to have more of, number one, a broader understanding of this, and number two, we need to realize, at least we have to have an internal discussion as Muslims. Don't think that these issues will not affect us. They will. Right? If you haven't had people in the community already come to you, or come to the imam, or even say, I have these tendencies, or I have these feelings, it will happen. Right? Because we live in a society, and we're going to be affected by the things around us. So we need to think about how we're actually going to practice our Islam in a way that we can at least insulate ourselves to the degree that we can possibly do that, so that we don't fall prey to many of these societal ills that are harming a lot of people. Allahu A'lam. This question says, the Muslim community in Charlotte is being held back by a disappointing level of disunity amongst the leadership of the different masajid in this area. What advice do you have for this community to help them overcome the fitna that has deeply plagued us and held back our potential? Well, one thing I would say offhand first is there's a difference between uniformity and unity. And there's a difference between complementary efforts and contradictory efforts. So we don't necessarily have to be united under one single banner in a city for us to be united in that sense. It could be complementary, right? This Muslim group or this masjid can be focusing on this part of town, or it could be focusing on this demographic or on this particular thing in a complementary fashion to another group. So our ultimate goal, when we have different organizations, if we can't be part of the same organization, at the very least, we need to be cooperative and complementary in the efforts that we do. In other words, because our numbers are so few, relatively speaking, and because our resources are generally limited, then at least we should cooperate in a way that's complementary, right? So if one of the Muslim organizations in the city wants to do a full-time school, and there's only a need for one full-time school, then why should two groups do it, right? It should be a complementary effort. And I think one of the things that leads to people not doing complementary efforts is the ego. This is going back to learning the Zen. Because people will say, well, they're doing it, but they're not doing it right. We can do it right. Yes or no? Oh, why? Where did you get that from? Right? If you believe that no one else can do this job right except you, or your group, or your mosque, or your keda, you're deluded. right? Let's just say they don't do it exactly the way that you want to do it. And out of 10 criteria, they do 7 of them, or 6 or 8. Is that not better than helping and supporting them do that particular effort, rather than you starting from scratch and doing the thing and then sucking resources that could have went to an effort that's already started and you started something new? Doesn't that make more sense? So people have to kind of let go of this idea that our egos plague us and we think that we're the only ones who do it right and they can't do it right. They're not on the right methodology, they're not on the right this, they are, they're all Desi and these are all Arabs. And we need to remove all of this nonsense, right? And just look at the effort. If you're not happy with the effort, go help. Offer your services. Say, how can I help you? What can we do to help? Right? And see yourself as a khadim, as a servant, not as an overseer. Right? I don't know how many board members are in this room, but my advice to all of you, you are one with them. You are all service. You are not in a position of power or authority. Do not run for your mosque board if you're doing it to have some authority and to do things right. It's not going to work. But what will work, I think, if you run for the board and say, people have asked me, and I think I can serve. I want to serve people. I want to serve the needs of people. Then do it. But don't do it because you want authority, right? If you seek authority, if you seek izz, except via Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will debase you. La mahala. Definitely. Anyone, any Muslim who seeks izz, right? If you seek authority, you seek izz, you seek dignity, anything outside from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by a measure of your own accomplishments, or what you think are your accomplishments, you will be debased. So you did with Allah. He will. He will debase you so that He can wake you up. And then you can come back to Him. But don't make Allah do that. Right? Approach it as a khadim, approach it as a servant, approach it in humility, and do what you can do. Right? Don't think you have to do it on yourself. And sometimes it means compromise. Sometimes it means sacrifice. Sometimes it means not getting everything that you want. Right? We have this funny idea that we're looking to other people and we expect to find everything that we want in them. Right? When people look for a spouse, a husband or a wife, they have a list of criteria and they need, to hit all 10. They have to be perfect in this way. How many of us, when we look to ourselves, we find everything that we want? Do you like every single thing about yourself? There's no room for improvement? Is everything about you perfect? So why are you looking for perfection everywhere else? You will not find perfection everywhere else, right? But look for khidmah, look for service. Okay, so I think, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I thank all of you. Jazakumullah khair. I think, so we have an announcement first.
So we have Brother Naseem Najib here, inshallah. He's going to make a small announcement in regards to his run for state senate. Assalamu alaikum. It's a blessing. I thoroughly enjoy Shaykh Walead's sober approach to Islam. He reminds me of Ali ibn W. Muhammad. A lot of his approaches, how he looks at things that very Islamic and Quranic based. Thank you, Ali. My name is Naseem Najib. I served here on Charlotte City Council for 8 years, and now I'm a candidate for North Carolina State Senate District 40. It's very important that that we have input into the process on the state level of what's going on. A lot of time, I find out with a Muslim being there, it just adds to the educational value. And also, you can't hit a home run sitting in the grandstand. You got to get in the ball game. So, we want to get in the ball game, and we need your help. March 15th is election day. March 3rd is early voting. So, encourage everybody. And some of you may be in my district, some of you may not. But in this northeast quadrant, just look up where you vote and encourage all Muslims to come out and vote. I'll share a little story with you. One time when I was running to county commissioner one time, or city council, city council, a Muslim came up to me and said, "Brother, politics is haram." He said, that's so wrong. And I said, well, politics is very Islamic. Prophet Muhammad was a great politician. He was a great government person. He was a military man. He was all kind of people that interests that we have as human beings. And so after I was in office, about 3 years later, he was a captain out. He came to me and said, Brother Najee, I need your help. I'm losing my license. I said, well, brother, did he say politics was haram? But we need to be in the game. The laws are being set, people saying different things, and we need to improve. It's our community. We need to improve it. We need to make input. And that's what I want to be as I go to Raleigh, to be make input, the changes to get North Carolina back on track again, in education, in a lot of services that have been cut. I'm the president of 18 neighborhoods here in this community. And you're a part of that community. You're part of the community called Eastbrook Woods. We have a meeting every fourth Monday at 11 a.m. We now have it at Greater Bethel AME Church, right up on the plaza. Invite you to come to the meeting. People want to know you. They want to know us. We're part of the community, and let's work together on common causes. We're working on a $40 million recreation center in the Eastway Park here. For the budget year 2017, we'll be requesting that to the county commission. It's going to be one of 4 regional parks in the whole Bedford Park system. And we'll be the first one. So come out, join us, help me get elected. Inshallah. That's all.
Please, people, vote. You have a chance to make change, to have a voice in the community. Go out and vote. This is important. This is part of our responsibility. So inshallah, we'll end the program with dua by Shaykh Walead, and after that we'll go for Salat al-Maghrib. There is food after Maghrib, so please, no one should go home without eating. So after Maghrib, please come back here into the gym, and we will have food.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين أجمعين وصلي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصلي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصلي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين ما شاء الله كان وما شاء لم يكن ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم اجعلنا من النار ومن خزي النار ومن كل عمل يقربنا الى النار وادخلنا الجنه مع الابرار يا عزيز يا غفار اغفر وارحم وتجاوز عما تعلم انك انت العزيز الاكرم وما اتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار اللهم نور قلوبنا بمعاني الايمان والاسلام والاسلام وزكي قلوبنا أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها مولاها برحمتك ومنك وفضلك يا أرحم الراحمين وافتح لنا فتوح العارفين بك وفرج عن إخوان المسلمين في كل مكان في سوريا وفي العراق وفي أفغانستان وفي أفريقيا وفي هذا البلاد وفي كل مكان يرفع اسمك وتبارك جودك والحمد لله ولا إله إلا غيرك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وأمرنا بأسرار سورة الفاتحة.
Jazakallah for all the brothers and sisters that came out for the program. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you, your families, and give you increase in your blessings for the effort that you've shown today. And Allah gives us the tawfiq to continue programming like this, and we really appreciate the help, and we ask for you to continue your support for us in the future. Jazakallah khair, and Allah make it easy for all of us.